may I invite Professor Jacob John, Dr. Philip Finney, and Dr. Shajida Selim on stage, please, to shed light on the life and legacy of the legendary Oskar Minkowski. I am honored to invite Professor Jacob John, Head of Public Health and Epidemiology in CMC.
Dr. Oskar Minkowski was a German doctor and a scientist best known for discovering the link between the pancreas and diabetes. He was born on January 13, 1858 in Alekstosis, which is now in Lithuania. Minkowski studied medicine at the universities of Coimbra, Freiburg, and Strasbourg. He earned his degree in 1881. He worked very closely with Professor Bernard Nairn, focusing on internal medicine and experimental pathology. In 1889, Dr. Minkowski and Joseph von Mering performed experiments involving the removal of pancreas from dogs and observed that animals subsequently developed diabetes. This pivotal discovery established pancreas as a critical organ in blood glucose regulation and provided key insights into the link between diabetes and pancreatic function. Dr. Minkowski's work was a milestone in the journey to unravel the mystery of diabetes. This discovery paved the way for future research, eventually leading to the discovery of insulin as a treatment for diabetes. In recognition of his contributions, the European Association for the Study of Diabetes established the Minkowski Prize, awarded annually to outstanding researchers in the field of diabetes. Throughout his career, Minkowski held professorships at several universities, including the University of Breslau. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize 6 times, reflecting the significant impact of his work on medical science. His pioneering research continues to influence the understanding and treatment of diabetes today. Let us honor the legacy of Dr. Oskar Minkowski by continuing to push the boundaries of our understanding, striving to develop new treatments, and working towards a future where the burden of diabetes is diminished for individuals and societies alike.
Thank you very much, Professor Jacob John, for your insightful and inspiring words. May I now request Professor Kaushik Ramaiah sir to come onto stage. I have the privilege of inviting Dr. Philip Finney, Head of Department of Endocrinology at Believers Church Medical College Hospital, to introduce Professor Kaushik Ramaiah, the distinguished recipient of this oration.
I would like to read out the citation. We hereby bestow the prestigious Oskar Minkowski oration upon Dr. Kaushik Ramaiah. Dr. Kaushik Ramaiah serves as member of the board of the World Diabetes Foundation and Honorary General Secretary of the Tanzania Diabetes Association, Tanzania NCD Alliance, and East African Diabetes Study Group. He is also President-elect of the East African NCD Alliance and a board member of the Global NCD Alliance. Dr. Ramaiah is the CEO and consultant physician at the Sri Hindu Mandal Hospital, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Dr. Ramaiah has held significant global leadership positions, including chair of the Sub-Saharan Africa region of the International Diabetes Federation from 2000 to 2006, Vice President Global of the IDF from 2007 to 2012. After completing his schooling in Dar es Salaam, Dr. Ramaiah pursued his basic medical training at the University of Bombay, India, followed by postgraduate training in internal medicine at the University of Dar es Salaam, and postmaster's training at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. Recognized for his global impact, Dr. Ramaiah was appointed Honorary Professor of Medicine and Global Health at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine and the University College London Institute of Global Health. Dr. Ramaiah has been instrumental in addressing type 1 diabetes in children, gestational diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and the cardiovascular complications of antiretroviral drugs in HIV and AIDS. His collaborative work with NIMRI and the University College London on CD-NCD integration and the META trial for metformin intervention in HIV patients with impaired glucose tolerance in health centers nationwide. A prolific researcher, Dr. Kaushik Ramaiah has published over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles, and continues to influence clinical practice and health systems in Tanzania and beyond. The latest news is that he has been given the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award from the Government of India, which is the highest honor conferred on Indians living overseas by Prime Minister Modi just a few days ago, and we didn't have time to include it in this citation. In recognition of his distinguished research and tireless dedication towards advancing diabetes care in India, integrating health interventions, and shaping a resilient health system under the most challenging of circumstances, we bestow the Oscar Minkowski Oration Award upon Dr. Kaushik Ramaiah on this, the 11th day of January, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Philip Finney, for that excellent and comprehensive introduction. As a token of respect and appreciation, may I now invite Dr. Shajida Selim, Associate Professor in the Department of Endocrinology at Bandhu Sheikh Mujib Medical University, Dhaka, to present the ceremonial shawls and plaques to Professor Kaushik Ramaiah. Honor to invite Professor Kaushik Ramaiah to deliver the oration. We are eager.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. And I'm overwhelmed. I didn't know about this thing. I thought it was just a simple oration. So I would like to thank Professor Nihal Thomas and the organizing committee for giving me this honor. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about phenotypic variations of diabetes in Africa, a diverse spectrum. This was a topic when I was discussing with Professor Nihal. I thought it would be an easy topic to deal with. But looking at the literature and looking at the studies in African region, I think we had a dearth of information, a lot of lack of information, and I had to dig in to try to come to some sort of a I would say, conclusions based on what the data is available and what are the gaps which we have in the African region. And I've concentrated entirely on the sub-Saharan African region. So for introduction, presentation, the last slide probably will find the puzzle. It's a 56-year-old male accountant presenting to the clinic for the first time. Symptoms are excessive urination at night, itching all over the body with palpitation, no history of smoking or alcohol use, no family history of diabetes and hypertension, is a normal weight, losing weight since past 3 months. HbA1c was 11.6, he had dyslipidemia, had systolic hypertension, urine glucose was positive, but he had no ketones. Case number 2, 64-year-old male businessman, known person with type 2 diabetes, diagnosed 2 years ago, took oral hypoglycemic agents with lifestyle modification, stopped medications after subjectively feeling well. Symptoms, he had a presentation of numbness in the lower limbs and difficulty in vision. He had history of alcohol use but no smoking, a strong family history of hypertension and diabetes. He was an overweight person, HbA1c 9.3%, hypertriglyceridemia, hypertension, urine glucose plus, albuminuria, and no ketones. Case number 3, 23-year-old female student, symptoms, suddenly feeling thirsty, excessive urination, fatigability, weight loss of more than 1 month, no family history of hypertension, diabetes, managed by the general practitioners as a UTI, no history of alcohol use or smoking, HbA1c more than 12%, urine glucose plus, ketones plus, and HB around 12 grams. And finally, case number 4, 38-year-old female housewife, symptoms palpitation, leg swelling, excessive urination at night for 2 weeks, was previously diagnosed to have diabetes 6 years ago, was started on oral hypoglycemic agent, responded well, and was on oral hypoglycemic agent. He had a good lifestyle adherence, good drug adherence, a regular follow-up, but no history of alcohol or smoking. HbA1c was 10.7, glucose plus, ketones plus, and proteins plus. He had an elevated blood pressure, dyslipidemia, peripheral neuropathy, and he had lost 4 kilos in the last 1 week. So you find that these are the 4 different variety of cases where you see clinically, and this actually exhibits to you the different phenotypes which we are talking about. So if you look at the historical perspective, the first discussion about malnutrition-related diabetes was by late Professor Jasbir Bajaj in 1988. He published an article in World Health Bulletin, October 1988. And subsequently, there were cases which were reported which could not be put into 2 classical types of diabetes, type 1 and NIDDM. There were 2 subtypes categorized under malnutrition-related diabetes. One was the fibrocalculus, and the other one is protein-deficient diabetes, also referred to as protein-deficient diabetes mellitus. It was a less commonly variants also included non-insulin diabetes of the young, which we call as MODY now, temporary diabetes, and intermittent insulin-dependent diabetes. So these were the first glances which we started seeing different phenotypes of diabetes in this African region. Then there was a paper in 2004 which talked about ketosis-prone type 2 diabetes in patients in sub-Saharan African origin. It was basically non-autoimmune ketosis-prone diabetes symptoms were increasing in the non-white population in the African region. It was a cohort of South African sub-Saharan origin who had ketosis-prone diabetes, and they were followed up for 10 years. They looked at epidemiological, clinical, and metabolical features at the diabetes onset. They measured include insulin secretion, glucagon-stimulated C-peptide, and insulin action. There was a strong male predominance, strong family history, high age and BMI, more severe metabolic decompensation than type 1 diabetes. There was discontinuation of the insulin therapy with development of the remission of insulin dependence, and in 76% remission was achieved. It was characterized by repeated bouts of ketosis, and 90% of them relapsed in 10 years, with whom 50% become insulin dependent. So ketosis-prone type 2 diabetes could be distinguished from type 1 diabetes and classical type 2 by specific features of clinical pathophysiology and by natural history of cell dysfunction, insulin resistance reflecting a propensity to glucose toxicity. So talking about type 2 diabetes and its heterogeneity, in the African region, type 2 diabetes is marked heterogeneity in pathophysiology, clinical presentation, progression, and response to diabetes therapies. The African diabetes phenotypes have low mean age and body mass index, more hyperglycemia and pancreatic beta cell dysfunction, and is predominantly underlying pathophysiological defect. It is prevalent atypical distinct diabetes subtypes, mainly in patients of African ancestry. There is a lean type 2 diabetes, ketosis-prone diabetes, and fibrocalculous pancreatic diabetes. And this was a paper work done by Dr. Kibirige from Uganda. We also had a paper which came in from abnormal glucose metabolism in Ethiopia, in a rural area in Ethiopia, which was a community-based cross-sectional study. 321 randomly selected participants aged 20 years and above were actually participated in that study. and more than half of them, 54% of them, were women with an overall mean age of 39 years. Overall prevalence of prediabetes and diabetes was 12.5 and 9.3, and this was a rural population with a very low weight. And if you look at the diagnosis in these individuals, and if you look at the abnormal glucose metabolism with age, body mass index, blood pressure, and lipid profiles in these individuals, you can see that even at a younger age, at 2029, the rate was 6.3% of abnormal glucose tolerance. At 30-39, it was 20%, and 40-49, it was around 35. So you had more than about 55% of the people with abnormal glucose tolerance below the age of 45-49. Again, the blood pressure and all the lipid profiles all showed quite a huge variabilities in these individuals. Again, there was a paper from Uganda showing diabetes phenotype study, which was by Kibirige again basically in 2022 here, and there was a low prevalence of islet autoantibody positivity in adult Ugandans with the new onset diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, which was characterized by the presence of islet autoantibody positive, was extremely infrequent, less than 1%, and there was an association between islet autoantibody positivity and living in a rural area, and which was intriguing finding that needed further investigation. And here the question came about the role of malnutrition. And due to the low prevalence of the islet autoantibody positivity in this study, routine testing of adult Ugandans with new onset diabetes was of limited clinical utility. So talking about diabetes in sub-Saharan Africa, when we go to type 1 diabetes, overall the prevalence of type 1 diabetes, if you see in Zambia is around 120, Sudan is 95, Mozambique 35, Nigeria 33, and Algeria 27 per 100,000 children under age of 19 years. The issue here is that probably this was a study which was done by Graham Ugal and his colleagues, and we looked at the numbers which were there in the different countries. And you find that it was believed that there were a lot of children who were not being diagnosed, and that's why the prevalence in the African region was low. If you look at the Tanzanian context, again, we looked at the context in Tanzania, the incidence was around 1.8 to 1.9, and this was in 1993, the incidence of type 1 was 1.5 per 100,000 in 1993, which has now gone to 1.8 to 1.9 in 100,000 in 2023. Again, Sudan, Eritrea have got very high numbers, and you've got Rwanda 2.7, and compared to United Kingdom, which is 28.1, and Finland 52.2. The problem with the incidence in Africa is there are many of them are undiagnosed. There is a misdiagnosis of these children with type 1 diabetes, and they are probably misdiagnosed malaria, meningitis, and typhoid. They've got a very high mortality because they did not reach the health facility earlier. There are lower genetic risk in the black population, and hospital rather than this data are basically hospital-based data rather than the population-based data. Then there was a publication from type 1 diabetes T1D index which showed in sub-Saharan Africa, and they believed that the number of people or number of children living with diabetes was 380,000, but the number missed in this region was more than 800,000, and this was based on a lot of calculations. So there was a huge gap between those who are coming to the facility getting diagnosed and those who are out in the community who never reach the health facility or are misdiagnosed. Again, data from type 1 diabetes incidence in Rwanda showing from 2004 to 2007, there has been a 7% increase, 5 to 7% increase, which was published recently. This is the Tanzanian registry of children diagnosed from 2009 to 2022, and you can see that usually there's a seasonal upsurge of type 1 diabetes. During the rainy season, starting from May, June, July till August, you get a very high peak of newly diagnosed type 1 diabetes cases. And you find that this pattern has been ongoing for the last since we started the registry. Again, the numbers are getting up, and we are getting better diagnosis, and we believe that the diagnosis is getting better because we have provided type 1 diabetes clinics up to the primary care and into the secondary care, so they are able to at least make a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes and refer them to the higher care centers. The incidence, prevalence, and clinical manifestation, the prevalence of under 15, as I said, is around 10 to 11 per 100,000 children. Annual incidence is 1.8 to 1.9, and many of these present with typical signs, with diabetic ketoacidosis in about 84% of the patient, but the numbers are small, so you cannot conclude comprehensively the other presentations. They do present with huge amount of complications. Many of these patients in type 1 diabetes in Tanzania have poor metabolic control. Microvascular complications are very common after a short duration of diabetes. Of those who are registered, HbA1c was done only in 36% of the patients, and it was more than 12.5%. And there was a high prevalence of retinopathy, more than 21%, neuropathy, more than 29%, and a very short duration of diabetes of 6 years. This was a paper which was published, which shows that if you want to have a tighter control, you need to see these patients much more frequently. If you want to attain HbA1c of less than 7%, attain your targets of blood pressure and lipids, you need to basically see them more frequently. Unfortunately, when the children are seen, or people with type 1 diabetes are seen at longer intervals, you find that basically it takes a longer time to bring them under control. Looking at type 2 diabetes, what is different about type 2 diabetes in Africa? There's a decreased survival from the disease. Most countries do not have national diabetes programs. Medications are unavailable or irregularly available and are unaffordable. Well-structured educational programs for the patients and health professionals are lacking. There's an unequal distribution of the facilities and providers, mainly concentrated in urban areas and rural, and people with diabetes have inadequate voice, and they are not empowered adequately. This graph, you have seen it you have seen it about 3 times today, so I won't mention about it. But if you look at overall prevalence and looking from diabetes atlas, you see that the numbers expected for diabetes increases are huge. More than 134% are going to be increased. The major countries to be affected are Tanzania, Zambia, Comoros, South Africa, and Seychelles. And these are the countries which are going to have a very high burden of diabetes. What's the epidemiology of type 2 diabetes? It is basically urbanization and lifestyle. Less than 3% diabetes in rural population, 3 to 10% in urban areas, more than 10% in migrant population. There is inter and intra-population variation, and there is basically for every diagnosed patient, there are 2 to 3 who are not diagnosed out in the community. There is a limitation of the interpretation because of the study methodology. There are no longitudinal cohorts. There is very limited quality studies, and there are variable biomarkers and criteria, and many of them are not available. Risk factors are mainly non-modifiables, are age and family history. The modifiable are increased adiposity, decreased physical activity, and increased urbanization. Others are genetic, which has got a limited information. There's an emerging data suggesting greater degree of genetic diversity in type 2 diabetes susceptibility compared with other populations, but it requires much larger scale studies. Environment is something which is work in progress. There are 2 or 3 studies going on looking at the effect of environment on the prevalence of diabetes and incidence of diabetes in the African region. There is a study which is basically has got stuck up because of some issues, but it is a landmark study which is known as H3A diabetes study, which is basically looking at SS and spectrum, environment and genetic determinants, and it is basically also looking at the complications, micro and macrovascular complications. It is being held it is a multi-country study. It is going to be in 8 countries with 11 sites, and it is a cross-sectional case series and population survey study. Unfortunately, the blood samples have been collected, the information has been collected, there is preliminary data available. Finally, the genetic assessment has been basically delayed. So when we talk about the complications of type 2 diabetes and epidemiology of type 2 diabetes, depending on which phenotype are we looking at, basically this is an assessment of paper which was published recently, which showed an overall hypertension in people with diabetes of more than 70%, dyslipidemia of more than 60% overall, metabolic syndrome 62%, renal abnormality or increased EGFR of more than 62%, cataracts of 22%, and stroke of 55%. So you can see that basically the burden of complications in these individuals is extremely high. And recently there has been a paper which has been published which has looked at 109 studies with 63,000 participants in meta-analysis, and the pool proportion looking at how many of the people with diabetes in the African region are attaining the goal of HbA1c of less than 7.5. It's only 27%. The BP goal of less than 140/90 is achieved by only 38%, and the LDL goal is achieved by only 42%. The diabetic peripheral neuropathy is around 38%, retinopathy is 32%, nephropathy 31%, peripheral arterial disease 19%, and foot ulcers 11%. So you are dealing with a situation of a population with diabetes of different presentations with very high complications, some of them developing complications much earlier, some of them at a later stage. 2 months ago, we have done a survey, a scientifically valid survey looking at rural population and urban population in Tanzania. We screened 3,181 people, more than 18 years of age, of which 18.4% were 60 years and plus. And if you look at Dar es Salaam and Geita, Geita is a rural region, and Dar es Salaam is an urban area. And if you look at the people who were screened, and you can see that in both blood pressure and diabetes, you see in young people between 18 and 24, already you find that all the overall burden of diabetes is 2.2%, blood pressure is around 10.9, and diabetes is 11.7, and blood pressure is 10.9. So we've got 27% between 25 and 60 years, 51.7% burden of diabetes and hypertension, and those over 60 years of age, 81% diabetes and hypertension burden. Again, if you look at the rural population in Geita, which is a completely rural population, still you see that the blood pressure in young people between 18 and 24 is around 36%, diabetes is around 2.3%, overall other NCDs and including asthma, cancer, and sickle cell, you find that the overall burden is around 17.8%. So we are dealing with an overall burden in a younger population who are developing, whose weights are basically underweight or normal weight, but you find that there is a huge high burden in this rural and urban population. Those with a number of risk factors, again, if you look at those risk factors of diabetes, hypertension, or whether they have got dyslipidemia, again, you find that more than 3 risk factors is around in 29% of the young people between 18 and 24 years of age, 35% in 25 to 60 years, and more than 40%. This is in urban population, and in a rural population it's around 30%. So you find that there is a huge high burden, and looking at different age groups, different weights, and you find that there is something which is happening there which we need to find out. Gestational diabetes, I think Professor Bayandeka looked at it, but this is an analysis of 2013-2018, looking at all the studies. Due to the different methodology of gestational diabetes, you find the rates are varying anywhere from 5% to 24% gestational diabetes in the African region. And main problem has been the age of those who are getting over 30 years of age, overweight and obesity, family history of diabetes, chronic hypertension, previous TDM, previous microscopic neonate, and previous stillbirth. And this contributes quite significantly to the high burden of gestational diabetes. Looking at the quality of care for diabetes, we are trying to look at the indicators of what indicators are we going to use. So we're looking at the process indicators, looking at education and counseling, measuring of the HbA1c, blood pressure measurements, lipid measurements, eye, foot, and CVD risk factors, but outcome indicators are based on the WHO Diabetes Compact indicators. What are the challenges? We have, at a macro level, establishment of the chronic care delivery model, incorporating disease interactions complexity, policy environment and equity between the different programs. HIV, TB, and these programs are much more better funded. At a meso level, looking at the biological interactions, looking at underlying risk factors, diagnosis, clinical presentations, complications, and comorbidities in different subgroups. Healthcare team capacity to deal with the high patient load, complexity of these comorbidities in these patients, staff attrition and training, supply chain and health management information system. At a micro level, it's a patient and the families, prioritization of which condition to treat first, treatment load, poverty, access, free programs versus out-of-pocket programs. And within this meso level also, looking at different tests or different investigations you could do to classify your patients into different groups. So what are the key take-home messages? Adopt an individualized approach to diabetes management that balances the potential benefits and harms of glucocentric and cardiocentric strategies. Initial and target HbA1c. Establish the risk of microvascular and macrovascular complications. Control the renal impairment, risk of hypoglycemia, body weight, and age of the patient. And consider the treatment strategy in context of the patient preferences, goals, barriers to treatment, including cost of glucose-lowering drugs, access and availability of medications, and drug formulations. So based on those case studies, this is the protocol of care which we would use in the clinic in the absence of different genotyping, phenotyping markers. And if you see, what my view is that we have classical type 1 diabetes, which requires insulin for survival, who is usually less than 20 years of age. And then we have got type 2 diabetes, which can be classified into 3 types. One is MODY, between 20 and 40 years of age. They require insulin for better control. Then those who are with a family history of diabetes, more than 40 years of age, these fall under 3 groups. One who require oral hypoglycemic agents, second group who requires oral hypoglycemic agent plus insulin for better control, and the third one which requires insulin for a good control. And then you've got the third group within the type 2 diabetes, which is purely lifestyle related, which requires lifestyle modification, requires metformin, DPP-4, TZD, or a sulfonylurea at the end. So I would like to acknowledge the Tanzania Diabetes Association, Tanzania NCD Alliance, Life for a Child, World Diabetes Foundation, Changing Diabetes in Children, who have been funding our programs, Ministry of Health, and the local government. Thank you very much.
As a token of our deepest respect and admiration for the extraordinary achievements, and to express our collective gratitude, may I humbly request everyone to rise and join me in offering a standing ovation to honor Professor Kaushik Ramayan. Thank you, Professor Kaushik Ramayan. Thank you, everybody.